Welcome to podcast 40 from Football-Oranje, your home of Dutch football. Today, I, Michael Statham, am joined by regulars Michael Bell and James Rowe, plus special guest Tom Kundert, who will offer his opinion on Ajax v Benfica in the Champions League. We'll also discuss PSV v Tottenham and evaluate the Dutch national team's 1-1 draw with Belgium. You can listen to us and download this podcast on YouTube, SoundCloud and iTunes, as well as our new home on football radio station, Football Nation Radio. Enjoy. Okay, well, thank you, Tom, for joining us today. I don't know if you'd just like to introduce yourself to our regular podcast listeners.
Hi there, thanks for having me, no problem. I'm a Portuguese football journalist based in Lisbon here. I've been living here for about 24 years now. And basically just immersed myself in Portuguese football, and luckily for me it's kind of coincided with a bit of a boom in Portuguese football. If you have a look at the seleção, the national side, and even the club sides, what they've done in the last 20 years or so has been very exciting. And of course, when you've got players like Cristiano Ronaldo and coaches like Jose Mourinho, there's never any lack of talking points. So I'm looking forward to this match. It should be a fantastic match. I'm sure we'll get on to all the ins and outs of it. But the first thing which kind of comes to mind for me is two of the most historic sides in the history of European football meeting. So hopefully they can do justice to that fantastic history they both have.
Yeah, it's a very historic match between two great sides. What do Benfica fans know and expect from this current Ajax side, though?
Yeah, well, generally Portuguese football fans are quite knowledgeable about foreign sides. Having said that, I think perhaps this Ajax side is a little bit unknown because I know they've got they've had quite a lot of turnover and quite a lot of young players, as is always the case with Ajax. Of course, they've got a fantastic tradition of bringing through players from their academy, and I think what most Benfica fans know about this Ajax side is probably just looking at their results and their performances this season in the Champions League, and it's a little bit of a worry from Benfica's standpoint, because it's really pretty much a perfect start, hasn't it? Ajax have made, they just swept aside AEK off Athens, and then got that fantastic result at Bayern. I just saw I think like most people here, just saw obviously Benfica were playing at the same time, so we just saw the highlights of that match. Very, very impressive, of course. I think Ajax were a bit unlucky not to win that match, to be honest. And so there's no doubt about it. Benfica are going to have a huge task to try and bring something back from Amsterdam.
If I now come to James and Mike, what do you guys think will likely happen in this match? Are we going to see the Ajax team that can sweep aside even very good European sides? They're a force to be reckoned with in Amsterdam. What do we expect on Tuesday from Ajax?
I think they'll use the same attitude they used when they started out at AEK Athens, where they showed so much passion and so much determination to get a positive result. But then again, Benfica are no AEK Athens. Tom makes a fantastic point about the rich history of both clubs. And, I do think the game will do justice. I mean, I managed to get a ticket for the match, and I look forward to attending on Tuesday. And since the draw was made, for a lot of people here in Amsterdam, a lot of Ajax fans, it's not just the fact they're in a group with Bayern Munich, they also respect Benfica and the rich history they have. I think it's going to be a real fantastic game that will do justice to the reputations of both clubs. And my prediction for the game is a 1-1 draw, actually.
For me, I expect Ajax to take the game to Benfica from the start. If you look at their recent results, they're on great form, especially at home. They just hammered AZ Alkmaar a couple of weeks ago 5-0. They beat Heerenveen so easily yesterday as well, 4-0. They've got so much attacking talent. I think they're going to know that this is the game. This is the key game for them in this group stage, the home one against Benfica. If they win it, it sets them up to not only challenge Bayern for the top, but also they'll know that if AEK Athens aren't going to win a couple of games, so that if they win this one, it's basically assured that they'll be, in Europe, in any competition, either the Europa League or Champions League past the winter, which is what their objective was going into this. And I think this is probably the biggest game for Ajax they've had so far. I think the draw at Bayern was unexpected, and the win against AEK Athens was. I think this game is the pressure one for me.
Well, Tom, as you can see, that there's plenty of expectation from the Ajax camp as well. And there's some really exciting players at the moment coming through and are leading this Ajax team. And they're also featuring the Dutch national team too. So are the expectations still very high with Benfica fans? Are they expecting to win this match? And what are the expectations of Benfica overall for this Champions League campaign?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point made by Mike just a while ago, saying this is really the key game for Ajax, and I think it's the key game for both Ajax and Benfica, isn't it, really? This one and this double header, you can say. I think probably this double header will go a long way to deciding who finishes second in this group. With all due respect to AEK Athens, they weren't really particularly impressive when they played Benfica at home in Greece, and so I would be quite surprised if they if they didn't finish last in this group. Bayern, they haven't started well, but they're Bayern Munich, and with all the power they have, you expect them to probably win the group. And so these next two games I think they're going to decide it. If one side can take 4 points, I think that will probably be decisive. As for Benfica's expectations, I think when the draw was made, I think most Benfica fans were fairly pleased with the draw, fairly confident. One very strong side, one pretty weak side, I think it's fair to say, and one probably at the same level as Benfica. And given that Benfica had an absolutely disastrous Champions League campaign last season when they lost 6 out of 6 in the group stage, I think this season most Benfica fans, they just want to kind of restore a bit of pride in the side, and I think they think they've got a chance. Like I said, perhaps expectations were a bit higher before we saw what Ajax did in the first 2 matches. Then afterwards, you have to say at this point in time, very difficult to split the 2 sides, but perhaps I'd make Ajax slight favourites, just because that could be a very important point they got at Bayern Munich, and so I think I'd probably make I'd make Ajax slight favourites to finish second, which of course means that Benfica, it's absolutely vital for them to try and avoid defeat. So I think a draw, if Benfica can get a draw in the Amsterdam Arena, they'll be absolutely delighted with that.
Tom, I had a quick question. Rui Vitória has been in charge of Benfica for quite some time. Are the Benfica fans and board still satisfied with his work? Can you see him staying there long term?
Well, that's a good question, because if you have a look at his record, of course he followed on from Jorge Jesus, which was a very hard act to follow, because Jorge Jesus is really the manager who kind of restored Benfica to the top of the football tree here in Portugal, because they really had a terrible time before Jorge Jesus was appointed. 15 years, they'd only won 1 championship, and very often out of the running very early in the season. He came in, completely turned around their fortunes. They won the championship 3 times in 6 years, always challenging right to the end. Had some good runs in Europe, mainly in the Europa League. And then when he left and Rui Vitória was given a job, a lot of people were quite worried that whether he could maintain that kind of level. And it's quite curious, because looking at his achievements, he's actually done pretty well. He's won 2 championships out of 3 seasons. In his first season, they also got to the Champions League quarterfinals, which was better than actually Jorge Jesus ever managed. But having said all that, he's a coach who I think most Benfica fans aren't particularly enamoured with, even given all these achievements. Why? Because he tends to, especially in the big matches and in Europe, he tends to be seen as far too conservative, not really taking the ball by the horns, not really kind of trying to impose an attacking style, very much adjusting what Benfica do and how he sets up his team to the opponents, and just having a very poor record, full stop really, against Porto and against Sporting and in the big games in Europe. And so although he's got a good record overall, he's not really, I'd say, Benfica fans are still kind of 50-50 with him. I think a lot may depend what happens this season in Europe, if they have a good showing in Europe, and also if they manage to reclaim the league, which they lost last season, then he'll be back in their good books. If neither of those things happen, then I think he may be on a bit shaky ground.
Interesting. Thanks very much. I noticed I watched the game, the derby against FC Porto, and I saw the tremendous finish from Haris Severovic. Do you think he will play a key part on Tuesday?
Yeah. And if you'd said either of those things about 2 or 3 months ago, Benfica fans wouldn't have believed you, because he came to Benfica last season. He started off quite well in pre-season. He scored a lot of goals, and even in the first 10 games or so, he scored 3 or 4 goals, looked like a good signing, and then his form just completely fell off a cliff, and he was really completely out of the picture by about Christmas, January. Barely played, and when he did play, he just didn't look up to standard, to be honest. Kind of big, lumbering centre forward, certainly not in the style of most Portuguese forwards who perhaps they're not so big physically, but usually they're endowed with quite a lot of skill. And so it looked like his career was actually coming to an end, a bit of a damp squib of an end, and especially when Benfica brought in 2 strikers, Ferreira from Argentine striker from Shakhtar Donetsk, who came with a big reputation, and also a Chilean striker, Castillo, who did quite well in pre-season. And both of those players were initially tried out the first few games. And of course, Jonas, who's been the number 1 striker for quite a few seasons now, he's been injured most of the season. What happened? Ferreira's just proved a bit of a flop so far. He just has hardly, I think he scored 1 goal. He's also had some injury problems. Castillo picked up an injury. Jonas, like I said, has been injured for most of the season. So Seferovic got back in the side, and he's just been an absolute revelation. He's just been a transformed player. He's been really good. He's got his confidence back. He's scored some good goals, like you said, some important goals. He scored a goal against AEK Athens, and that very important goal against Porto. A lovely finish that was, first time on the run, thumping finish into the bottom corner. And his whole play, he's just, he looks a different player this season. So, yeah, absolutely no doubt he will be. I expect Benfica to play 4-3-3, and Seferovic will be the starting striker for sure.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you a question then. If those are the strengths of Benfica, what are their weaknesses? Are there any weaknesses in defence that Ajax might look to exploit?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I perhaps wouldn't go so far as to say Seferovic was a strength, even though he's done well this season. I think probably the most dangerous player for Benfica this season is Salvio. The Argentine winger has been at Benfica for a long time now. Very skillful player. Unfortunately, his career at Benfica has often been halted by very, very bad injuries. I think, although on the one hand, if he didn't get these injuries, then he probably wouldn't still be at Benfica, because he's a fantastic player really, and is quite often has been on the cusp of a move. I think at one time was all signed, sealed, and delivered to go to Liverpool, and then he got in the very last game of the season he did in his cruciate knee ligaments, and so that was aborted. And so, but he's been back to sparkling form this season. I'd say he's probably the most dangerous player Benfica have. As for their weaknesses, they definitely do have some quite obvious weaknesses, which Ajax might try to exploit. I think the right back, Andre Almeida, is he's a bit of a curious player because he's never really been a favourite of the Benfica fans and even the critics. They tend to give him a lot of a bit of a hard time, and I think most of the time justified. But he's been there for 5 or 6 seasons, and he's got that right back spot. He's made it his own. But for instance, in the game against AEK Athens, Benfica went 2-0 up, and then they just had a player sent off, got completely lost, and AEK pulled it back to 2-2, and they were a bit lucky to win that game in the end, Benfica. And Andre Almeida just had an absolute disastrous game, just gave the ball away time and time again, and the left winger for AEK just like made mincemeat of him. So that could be a worry for Benfica. And then also their centre backs for this particular game, I think they've got quite a big problem on their hands, because Ruben Diaz, who's probably the best centre back, is of course a young centre back, very tough tackling, consistent, very promising from the Portuguese point of view, promising player, but he got himself sent off. He's sometimes a bit rash and got himself sent off stupidly in Greece, so he'll be missing this game, suspended. His usual partner, Jardel, has been injured the last couple of weeks. There's a few reports today saying perhaps he'll be okay for the Ajax game, perhaps not. So even if he is, he may not be 100%. And then because of these problems at centre back, Benfica have used both 2 Argentine centre backs, Conti and Lema, who they brought in this summer. So we don't really know too much about them because they've hardly ever played. They've both played 1 match in the last couple of weeks, and both of them ended up getting sent off. Would you believe it? In the last few minutes. So big problems there in the heart of the defence. So that's definitely something which Ajax, I'm sure, will be looking at and trying to exploit.
To me, this sounds like Ajax have got a huge chance in this game, and I think they'll have really high confidence as well after some great results in the league too. Where they've been quite ruthless in front of goal, something they may have been lacking last season. They're certainly not this season, and there's a lot of attacking players that will look to really go at Benfica in this match. I just wondered if we get some predictions from all of you. Should we start with Mike?
I'm going to go for a positive 2-0 victory. I think the Johan Cruyff Arena will be rocking for this one, and I think Ajax will do the job.
My prediction is 1-1, considering the current standings of Champions League Group E, with Ajax 4 points, Bayern Munich 4 points, and Benfica 3 points. I think part of the match will turn cagey at some point, and my prediction is 1-1.
Yeah, I agree with Mike there about. I think it probably be a cagey match. Of course, you never know, an early goal and that could change, but I think. Because, like I say, Benfica will be pleased with a draw without doubt, especially because of all these problems they've got at centre-back for this particular match. I think they'll be quite defensive, and they'll be hoping to just to scrape a point. But I do think that's really too many problems they've got at centre-back. And with the form Ajax are in and the form they've shown, I think I'm going for an Ajax victory, perhaps 2-1.
Yeah, I might also say a 2-1 win for Ajax. It sounds like things are going in their favour, and in Amsterdam they should be heavily favoured, in my opinion. Well, Tom, thank you very much for joining us on the Football-Oranje podcast. Very much appreciated your time there.
Okay, no problem. Hope you enjoy the match, but perhaps don't enjoy it too much.
Thank you very much, Tom. Muito obrigado.
Okay, obrigado, Will. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, so our second match that we should preview this week involves another Dutch team in the Champions League, PSV against Tottenham Hotspur. This is another tasty match, and especially in Eindhoven, it should be very tight. We saw PSV lose narrowly to Inter Milan in their last Champions League fixture, in which they were unfortunate not to get a point. But I mean, do you not think that Inter Milan ultimately outclassed PSV in the night, had that little bit extra experience that maybe Tottenham could carry again?
For me, yeah. I think the biggest problem PSV have in these games is their centre-back duo. Schwab and Vierhever is not a Champions League centre-back partnership. They got found out by Icardi time and time again for Inter. He missed several chances during the night. It could have been much worse for PSV that night. And I don't really fancy the chances up against Harry Kane. One of the best centre forwards in the world. He might have a field day if Tottenham are on it. You've got to hope that at the other end, PSV can do something, because I can certainly see Tottenham scoring at least one in this game.
Mark van Bommel is the first PSV manager to win 9 Eredivisie matches in a row. They've scored 36 and conceded 3. And I think their confidence is extremely high. And I think the way that Van Bommel has got them believing, I mean, Mike made a tremendous point in the last pod, about the way they're so proactive and how they seem to be steamrolling everything in sight in a domestic front. And I think sooner rather than later that's going to blossom in a European match. And not to the extent where they'll win convincingly, but for example, they may pick up a point or they might get a win which nobody really expected. And I actually think that with Tottenham's away form in Europe, losing in Milan, in the past they haven't got positive results in many European destinations, even getting knocked out by Gent from Belgium in the Europa League a couple of years ago. I think because this match is in Eindhoven, I can see PSV picking up a point, and my prediction is 1-1.
I think PSV will win this match. I feel quite confident. Perhaps I hope I'm not riding too much of a crest of a wave. Dutch teams do tend to slip up in matches you expect them to win. But this does favour PSV. I don't think Tottenham have been the most convincing on the road this season in the league. I'm looking, since they lost away Inter Milan, they beat Brighton 2-1. They beat Huddersfield 2-0 and West Ham 1-0. So they're not convincing huge victories. And I just think that if PSV can really apply the pressure, they can get some goals. And of course, you're looking at Harry Kane on the other end of the pitch. And I think Hendricks is going to have a tough time on his hands trying to keep some of these attacking midfielders quiet, especially if Eriksen plays. So we'll see how that one goes. But yeah, in terms of the league, just briefly, PSV 9 out of 9. That is such an excellent start. Is that down to Mark van Bommel? Is that what has he changed so much about this team this season?
Winning mentality. I've had to eat my words very quickly when I stated on this pod that it's a bit of a jump from the PSV under-19s to the first team, but I've been made to eat lots of portions of humble pie, because the career that Van Bommel has had and what he experienced as a captain at world-class clubs, and to be so authoritarian, even when he's addressing the media, when you listen to him, you realise this is a manager that hasn't just played professional football. He's played at the highest level, domestically, and also for his country as well. And I think he gives that team an entire boost, where on the training field he gives them little tweaks of advice, takes them to one side, tries to help them. And I think they all buy into the fact that they're being advised by someone who had a stellar career. And went on to achieve many positive things. Captained his country to a World Cup final, and I just think these small detail is really paying off. I mean, you can see yesterday against Emmen, they're 4-0 up at half time, and to keep pushing to get more goals. And Van Bommel even said that in his post-match interview that for him the most impressive part of the night was not the 6-0 win, but it was the defensive ability of Angelino to retrieve a ball that was just going over the line to keep a clean sheet. So they're always wanting more. It's still very early in the season. I don't think they're over the hills and far away already. But it's just, as you say, Michael, a tremendous achievement, 9 out of 9, especially with the goals return as well. And I just think that at some point in this Champions League group phase campaign that they're going to get a result, be it away from home or most probably at home, that not many people expected.
It's a bit of a last chance saloon for them as well, isn't it? Because even already you're looking at them having to do Spurs over these 2 legs and to get at least 4 points to be able to finish above Tottenham and at least finish third. finishing second already looks a little bit unlikely. Not that it's out of the question, but it's already going to be a difficult task, isn't it, to finish anything above fourth place in this group?
It's do or die on Wednesday, I think, in Eindhoven. I know you're saying that the prediction was a draw, but for me, if PSV don't win this game, I can't see them getting much else out of Tottenham away, Inter away, and Barcelona at home. I know Barcelona haven't had the greatest start of the season, and Lionel Messi's injured, but you fancy them as big favourites for that one as well. So I think if PSV, they're so confident in the league, if they can take some of that confidence into the Champions League, get a result against Tottenham, get a win, which would then boost them against going into the away fixture in London. I think if they lose this one, then I think they're going to finish bottom. But for me, the biggest thing that Mark van Bommel's done is he's got that front four clicking, and they've scored so many goals, but there's not one out-and-out goal scorer who's just run away with it. I feel like Luke de Jong's got 8 goals, Lozano's got 8 goals, Pereiro's got 7, Bergwijn 4. All 4 of them, he's kept them basically playing constantly, and you can just see the partnership of all 4 of them is really clicking this season, and they're, for me, one of the best and most clinical front lines in any European league when they're on it.
Yeah, no, I think Mike's got made some very good points as usual, especially in terms of PSV. And I just think it'd be a good match. I think PSV, I think they're always well up for European home games, especially in the Champions League. You saw in the past the atmosphere they can create when they played Atletico Madrid at home not so long ago. And I think Tottenham are in for a bit of a shock, to be honest.
Okay. Before we talk about our last topic this week, I'd just like to point out a couple of results that happened in the Eredivisie this weekend. And one of the surprising ones for me was VVV Venlo yet again winning and sitting in 5th place in the league. Just to show that actually that all of these wins at PSV are accruing, and yet there are still teams that are doing well at this level and are pushing the top 3. And I'm looking at Heracles, VVV, who are surprising yet again. I just want to get your thoughts on the surprises so far this season.
I would mention Excelsior too.
Oh yes, certainly.
The Excelsior manager was the physio of Excelsior Rotterdam for the last 25 years, and he was given the top job, and he was everyone thought it was like a little bit mean in terms of is this really happening? And to beat a very decent Vitesse side, okay, with home advantage, but you still have to beat them. Excelsior are currently sitting in 8th position, having won 3, drawn 3 and lost 3. I think that deserves a decent mention. Heracles as well, as you know, and listeners of the pod will know, I tipped them to go down. Once again, my humble pie is coming in by the bucket load and by the truckload, but it's still a long old season, as we know only too well. And again, with VVV to be in 5th, I think full credit to Maurice Stein, because I know that he was approached by certain clubs and he didn't give too much away in terms of who they particularly were, but he would always state that it wasn't something which made him want to leave VVV Venlo. And I think sticking to his guns is really paying off. And he often stated in previous interviews in the run-up to the season that he was a bit, not sceptical, but just a bit wary as to how the squad would react to him going into a 5th season. But I mean, he's just so committed to the club. You know, you've got to remember he commutes from The Hague to Venlo every day for work and to manage the team, and I think sticking to his guns is really proving a masterstroke, really, and be interesting to see how far they can go this season.
Yeah, definitely, and it's good to see some different teams doing well. On the flip side, you've got AZ Alkmaar that are currently sitting in 6th, having won only 3 games out of 9 matches. However, Mike, good news on Calvin Stengs this week in terms of AZ and the Dutch national team. Hopefully it's a really quick recovery now back to the first team.
Yeah, he played for the under-23 sides in the 2nd division on Friday, won a penalty. Played an hour. I was expecting him to maybe be on a bench for the league tie at Utrecht, but they just want to give him a little bit more rest. But he should be back in the first team next week, and they desperately need it because that side is definitely lacking something at the moment. These players just aren't clicking like they did last year. They're missing Johan Bakash and Weghorst desperately. there was a lot of hype around Gus Till, but that seems to be falling flat now because they named him captain, but he's just not impressing anymore. He was left out of the Netherlands under-21 squad, which was big news in the Netherlands at the time. There's just something not going right there, and I saw the John van den Brom out tweet start again yesterday, and the coach is starting to come under pressure.
Yeah,
I think it would be wise for us to mention Groningen as well. To lose 5 out of the last 6, it's looking a bit ominous even now. In terms of, I think in the next couple of weeks, Danny Bowes may well be replaced, and I think it's critical for Groningen now that they select the right manager going forward. I stated on a previous pod not so long ago that when Danny Bowes was appointed, Ron Jans, who's behind the scenes working at Groningen, that helped to appoint him, said that this is for the long term and this is what we want to achieve. But the fan unrest as well at Groningen, getting knocked out of the Kuiper Bebeke as well. It's all becoming a little bit too much. But very interesting about Van den Brom out tweets that Mike just mentioned, because I think that can be quite telling, and who knows, there could be some openings coming up in the new year perhaps.
Yeah, and interestingly, Groningen's next fixture is PSV at home, so another really tricky fixture for them. And we're full circle back to PSV because some of their best young players at the moment are starting to get into the Dutch national team, and some of them played yet again in the Belgium 1, Netherlands 1 friendly fixture during last week. What did you guys think of that performance, and were you impressed with any of the players? Rosario made his debut.
Yeah, for me it was another very positive performance from the Netherlands. I think they started slow. I think it's an aspect of Netherlands under Koeman. They seem to start slow but grow into games, and after they got the equaliser, they were, for me, the better side. I know Belgium took off probably their best players at half time, the Hazards and Lukaku's, but in the second half I think the Netherlands were lucky at times not to win it. For me, Memphis was once again a standout, but I enjoyed what I saw from the debutants. Dan Juma got his goal, he played well. Denzel Dumfries, I think for me, was the standout for both matches. He's the one that really impressed me the most, and I think he can really hold down that right back slot if he keeps playing like that, and he keeps playing well for PSV. It's just for me, it's just another exciting fixture for the Netherlands. It shows that we're once again on the right track, but it's important not to get ahead of ourselves. 2 big games coming up in November. If we win one of them, we stay in this top of the Nations League. If we lose both of them, we could get relegated and miss out on the top pot of the Euro 2020 qualifiers, which would be a disaster again. But it's all very positive heading into those games, and I think we can definitely do something against France.
Yeah, I fully agree with Mike's points. I think that to sum it up for me, I think every international break, I think the Netherlands are improving under Koeman, and you can't really ask for more, because we all remember the dark days under Blind and the difficulty with Advocaat as well in difficult games, not winning, having no charisma. And Koeman has been in charge since February, and there has been significant progress since then in terms of wins against Portugal, and obviously winning against Germany, and going away from home against Belgium and not losing. And I just think Dumfries as well, to be 22 and to be so assured at international level already, is something very special. And I'd proclaim once again that he's come up through the traditional route of Sparta Rotterdam, Heerenveen and now PSV, and it will give so much incentives that other young Dutch players coming through the domestic Eredivisie, that they can do the same. Naturally, the attributes that Dumfries has helps, but I just think it's great that they're improving every international break, and we'll see them improve even more. I can't see them being relegated from the Nations League pool. I think they'll remain there, which will be a good sign. But regardless of when that Euro 2020 qualifying draw is made, they've got to really take on board, especially the away fixtures, because with the failure of the campaigns for Euro 2016 and Russia in World Cup 2018, in both occasions they took the away fixtures far too lightly in terms of away games in Reykjavik, in Prague, in Konyaspor, and then with the subsequent qualifying campaign in Solna, in Sofia, in Paris. So they will do well to, when the draw is made, to assess and be aware that they need to perform just that little bit better, especially away from home against even mid-ranked nations, to assure their place at Euro 2020.
For me, I found that this international break was quite a landmark one, because we saw Dumfries, De Jong, De Ligt, Bergwijn. These guys, for me, are absolutely going to be the core of the future Dutch national team sides, and I don't think you'll often see them out of the team. Of course, we've seen De Ligt already play for the team quite a few times. De Jong made his debut back in September, but you're seeing these players actually settling into the first team, and I think that's really exciting. It's such a landmark couple of months for the Dutch national team. I don't know if you guys agree.
Very promising. It's something we've all waited a long time for, and it's great to see the green shoots coming up, and very promising going forward.
Yeah, it's very exciting for me, and the best thing is these are the core talents coming through, but there's so much elsewhere as well. Under 19s, under 17s, to an extent, some of the under 21s, they're full of talent. And a couple of years ago, we were all talking about how bad the Netherlands were, and there's nobody coming through. And it just shows that it's coming full circle again, and we're starting to produce these talents. And it's good to see that it's the Germans now that are getting it in the neck instead of us. It's funny because going back onto Heracles Almo, they hired the coach that was in the DFB, German head of, I think he was head of coaching or coach selection, Frank Wormuth, and since he's come to Heracles, he's been a revelation, and the German coaching is suffered. So I wonder if there's a correlation there.
I think Germany's problem is of their own making, of letting the current manager stay far too long, where the caps that he's been handing out to players that are not quite good enough, I think Lowe has thought that he's a bit untouchable, to be honest. But I recall an interview I did with the Graafschap manager Henk de Jong on the eve of the season, where Henk de Jong, I asked him about the situation with Oranje, and he said to me that they've always had good players, but it comes in waves. It comes in waves in terms of the generations that come, and that he was confident that everything would be okay. And I think that's for someone who's working at the highest level in the Eredivisie, and obviously to hear his opinion on it, and sort of the way of players, I think that's very, very important.
I still think going forward they are missing a number 9 striker. If Memphis isn't there, then you're looking at Luuk de Jong or Wout Weghorst. That's the one key area that over the next few years they really need to look for someone. There's talents. There's Dylan Vente at Feyenoord. There's Redan at Chelsea, Xerxes at Bayern Munich, and Perrault at PSV, Sirhus at Ajax. These are the players that need to be hopefully fast tracked through the under 21 squad as quickly as possible, and get them into some way into the national team as soon as possible heading into Euro 2020, because I think that position is key.
Yeah, I think I said after we finished recording our last podcast that I think Dejan Radani is the answer, except that he's just a few years behind his development. Not behind, but his actual age. He's doing really well for his age, but is he going to be old enough, mature enough, good enough by Euro 2020, or if not, the 2022 World Cup? Football goes really fast. We've seen that with Rosario, for example, of how quick he can get to this level. Can Redan do that as well? Can he get into the side by the time he's 20, for example, or will he still be too young? For me, I think he's the answer, and I think he's the one that needs to be fast tracked and developed further at club level and at international level to make sure that he's ready to be that number 1 striker.
Well, there's some stories coming out around under 21s. He obviously failed to qualify for another European Championships, and one of the big questions was around selection policy, as to why he was still picking players that weren't actually going to be, that are past age group or past age level for the next one when because they weren't going to qualify. He picked like Bart Ramsar, who wouldn't be available for the next qualifiers. And they're asking him why is he picking these young talents that are in the under-19s, under-17 levels sooner, because they're obviously better than what they have now. The under-21s are playing with Chiro Zivkovic up front, who's not exactly setting Belgium on fire, when they have players like Raydan, Dylan Vente, who are still stuck in the under-19s, the under-20s, when they could be fast-tracked into the under-21 squad, play against better players and become better themselves. These players play for Chelsea's under-23s, Bayern Munich's under-23s. They play against this age group, but in the Netherlands youth system, they seem to have to go through you're under-17 level now, next year be under-19s, next year be under-21s, whereas some players need to get fast-tracked a lot sooner.
I think with the failure to qualify, I think that the Dutch FA will do like a bit of a inquiry and a root and branch as to why they failed. If you look in the past of the under-21 managers they've had, Owen van der Looy and Ard Langler, I think the Dutch FA KNVB would be wise to look at other candidates in terms of the under-21s manager. I remember when I spoke to Martijn de Roosa, who's manager of the under-15s, and when we were speaking, he was saying about the different age groups try to work in unison, where they're getting players ready to make the next step. And I think Mike makes a good point about the players not being picked. But if you have an under-21 manager who realises the entire process and lets the players understands the process for letting players come through the selection policies of the different groups and finally picks them for the under-21s, I think we'll see an improvement. So it'll be interesting to see what the Dutch FA do with that.
Well, James and Mike, thanks very much for joining me this week on the 40th Football-Oranje podcast.
No problem, thank you.
You're more than welcome, and a big thank you to Tom as well. We've finally managed to get a guest with a great reputation as well, and I think it's really helped today's podcast and will hopefully help the site going forward too.
Brilliant. Well, thanks both, and speak to you soon.
You're more than welcome. Take care.